Since 1998, Lanco Group has been providing superior civil engineering solutions and advice to developers, local government and service authorities across Australia. Lanco Group is known for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Are you looking to change your destiny in life? Be your own boss? Start your own business? If you are, you need people who understand your needs and are committed to helping you make it happen. At DKP & Co Chartered Accountants, we are more than just accountants. We are business advisors, taxation consultants and strategists that specialise in setting up businesses. We understand the client and give them the very best customised advice and strategies to achieve their goals. Visit our website dkpco.com.au or give us a call today on 03 9023 9370. Fast, proactive, personal. That's DKP & Co Chartered Accountants.
You're listening to the State of Our Football Nation on FNR. George Denikian, along with Pokuah Frimpong in the studios at Docklands. This is Football Nation Radio, and State of Our Football Nation is the name of the program. And each and every week we cover a number of different topics. The topic on everyone's lips this week is, of course, Grand Final, the A-League Men's, coming up on Saturday night. Paramount Plus and Channel 10 getting ready for it. What have you made of all the prep? We've had plenty of time to think about it.
We have had plenty of time to think about it, but I'm looking forward to the game as a whole. I've been seeing some of the old matchups between Melbourne City taking on Central Coast Mariners and seeing, what that was like. And I look forward to the atmosphere. I think it being in Parramatta and being down at Combank Stadium. Which, have you had the pleasure of going down to Combank?
No.
So I went to Combank for the A-League Women's Grand Final. And something I really enjoy about that stadium is that it's quite vertical as opposed to it going out.
Yeah, gotcha.
So the sound is like right on top of you, and it's a really nice stadium.
So it's a bit like a bull ring, is it?
Yeah, it is. But it's a really nice stadium. I like it a lot. And
playing surface. What do you make of the playing surface? Will it be ready? Because there's an awful lot of traffic this year.
Yeah, it has been an awful lot of traffic, but I think it should be fine. And I think if it is a little bit more bumpy, I think that's probably serves Central Coast a little bit better than it does Melbourne City if the pitch is a little bit more bumpy. Melbourne City's game seems to be something
thrive on Amy Park.
Yeah, that nice carpet.
Yeah.
Which Amy Park hasn't always been a carpet, that's for sure.
No. The problems at Amy have been always brought on by outside interests, like rock concerts.
Yes.
Or
the rugby.
Dare I say it, the rugby union. Or the rugby league. Yes. Or the monster trucks. Or the whatever. Read whatever you want into it. By the way, our special guest this particular program will be none other than Channel 10's or the Paramount Plus commentator, Simon Hill. Looking forward to what he thinks of that and some other things that are taking everybody's interest in the game. So many things have been happening overseas. A number of years, only I think half a dozen years after Leicester created magic and wrote itself one of the best fairy tales that you could ever write anyone. Even Hollywood struggled to believe that at 5,000 to 1, Leicester were a chance to win the English Premier League. They did, but here they are 6 years on, and the game, the cruel nature of the game has shown what can happen. It's just been relegated from the English Premier League to the Championship.
I think the difficulty for obviously COVID hit a lot of clubs, around the world differently. But Leicester is one of the clubs that got hit by COVID extremely hard because
I think the problem was that the man who owned the club got killed in a helicopter accident.
But that was before their struggles. But what I'm saying is that obviously a lot of the money that Leicester as a club gets, and the reason that the family that owns the club is wealthy is through the airline company. And with COVID, it was severely hit, so there was less there was less money available to the club, and it's hard to compete.
That's a very fair comment, but I still think had he been around, he may well have been able to engineer some better outcomes, but we'll never know now.
And I think that the Leicester going down is obviously really difficult for Leicester as a club, but it's probably a benefit to a lot of Premier League clubs because Leicester are going to have some of their players are going.
Jettison, fire sale.
It's going to be an absolute fire sale.
You're getting excited, aren't you? Who would Arsenal pick up from that fire sale?
I think the players we would have got are already left, unfortunately.
Oh.
Yeah, because we would have got Fofana, and Fofana's no longer there.
Oh, he's at Chelsea.
He's at Chelsea now. So
mind you, he could still be available.
Yeah, Chelsea.
We've just heard that Mauricio Pochettino, the former Spurs man, has accepted the role of manager, and he's got a 2-year contract with one more should the club think he does a good job. Which
is so interesting to the club, if he does a good job at the club. I think it's something that we've learnt with the likes of when we talk about Nick Montgomery and we talk about like Mikel Arteta and things like that. You've got to have really good leadership above you, and otherwise it just fundamentally doesn't matter what kind of quality manager that you have in your club, because they can only do so much. If the club is rotten from the top, there's only so much you can.
Can't argue with that. By the way, do you believe in the adage that some people never learn?
Yes.
There's been an awful lot of growing chatter coming from the English Premier League that a certain Ange Postecoglou may well be approached after the Scottish Cup final and might be offered a role as manager in an EPL club. And, of course, guess what's happened in the last 24 hours? People coming from everywhere saying, he's 57, what's he done? And how do you say his name?
You see, this is the thing, George. This is the thing about Tottenham fans, unfortunately, for you. Not you,
What, you're
George.
Saying they're not intelligent?
Not you, George. Not you. You're great. Fantastic.
They're delusional?
See, my club, Arsenal, we took faith in a man who was coaching in Japan, was doing some wonderful work, and we got some beautiful years out of it. They has to have faith in Ange. And
so what you're saying to me is
done more than
you had the Ted Lasso effect even before Ted Lasso.
Arsenal was certainly sterner than Ted Lasso. But what I'm saying is that you've got to take, like, if your club is, Tottenham can't sit in this lull of just sitting it around the fourth. You've got to make that leap, and you've got to take a risk. And Angie's certainly done enough, I think, in his career to deserve and warrant an interview and also the job at Tottenham Hotspurs.
But people already thinking, he's 57, what's he done?
It's 57, it doesn't matter.
It means naught.
It means absolutely nothing.
Absolutely naught. A couple of things that are very important as we lead into the grand final, the men's A-League grand final on Saturday night. The week is almost ended, and so are a bundle of careers. We've heard that Alex Wilkinson, the former Central Coast Mariners, the former Melbourne City man, the former Sydney man, or the captain of Sydney, has decided to retire.
Yes.
Effective immediately. It's been a great innings, and he's been a wonderful servant to the game. I think he's also been representative of the PFA, hasn't he?
He may have. Not
Yeah. He's played a pretty strong role.
What I was going to ask you, George, was Sydney FC, when they were announcing that he was retiring, they said that he was the greatest of all time in the A-Leagues. Now, you've certainly seen more A-League games than I have.
I hate the term greatest. I really, really do.
Well, I think they might say the best has ever done it or something like that.
But, Look, he's had an let's pack it this way. He's had an outstanding career. He's been a wonderful servant to the game and to every club that he's attended and played for. And I wouldn't have thought there'd be a fan who could point a finger at Alex Wilkinson and say he's done us a disservice. He was marvellous when he was at City, at Melbourne City when he was there. Under that time he was there, I think they won their first ever trophy, which was the old FFA Cup. I'm trying to think. He then went to Sydney, and they had a fabulous run. Mind you, that they had a pretty good side, but he added to it. And he, of course, long time ago, he was a tremendous talent at the Central Coast Mariners. So it's been a terrific journey for him. He's not the only one pulling the pin. We're hearing now that the referee, the man who will officiate the A-League men's grand final, Chris Beath, who has done just about everything that a referee can do, and that is he's officiated at World Cups, he's officiated at major tournaments around the world, which tells you that they think what the international fraternity think of him, and he says that it'll be his last game. Probably has other things. Maybe he might move into the administrative chair of the referees, and they need good people. But Chris Beath calling it a day.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the game without him, because we like to not think about referees, but they become such characters in the game for us, and we can become familiar with their names, and we like some referees when they are with our team, and we don't like some referees, but he's done an outstanding job, Chris, and you know, he will be missed. His level of understanding and quality will be missed. And
early on in the week, we heard that a young guy called Scott Jamieson, the captain of the Melbourne City side, has also decided to hang them up after the grand final. It put a number of noses out of joint. Nick Montgomery wasn't happy. He didn't believe that anyone should be looking at retirements or resignations, or he just wanted the game to be basically judged as being the showpiece game of the year between two sides, and let the best team win. And he thought it was a bit of a mind game. What are your thoughts?
I don't know if it's a mind game, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think Jammer was going to retire.
But you can understand Nick.
I can understand it, but I don't think that Scott Jamieson or Melbourne City were being that calculated in their actions to it. Maybe I'm being naive about it, but I just think I don't know how that becomes a mind game unless you allow it to become a mind game.
Yes, I think it's about distraction. You know, watch what my left hand is doing, I'll spank you with the right hand, that sort of thing. Exciting stuff, though. I'm looking forward to hearing from Simon Hill. We've now seen the EPL season, this extended double-pronged season end, and of course we've seen the sides that will be going down. We now know that it's not only Southampton, not only Leicester, but Leeds too. After a terrific couple of years, they just lost their way.
Do you think it's karma for letting Bielsa go?
Oh, there'll be an awful lot of Bielsa fans who'd say, "Told you so."
Because there was, I think he, up until the day he left, he was still quite popular with the fans, and then the club decided to let him go, and they. I think when you learn that if you're going to decide to sack a coach, you better have a good backup plan, especially with Bielsa. If Pep Guardiola says he's the guy that I looked up to as a manager, and you're letting him go, maybe might not be the right decision. But also, Melbourne Victory announced today.
That is so true. I wasn't going to mention it. I thought I might let Simon Hill tell us that something untoward has happened at the Victory. They had a big luncheon today, and their chairman, Anthony DiPietro, has pulled the pin. Another resignation. It's effective immediately, and I understand that one of their independent board members, John Doveston, has been appointed, and he replaces DiPietro effective immediately. Now, he's been an independent board member for about 8 years, and I think he'll be the first independent, non-shareholder to hold the seat of chair at the Melbourne Victory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How does that, obviously you worked in administration and football. How does that come about when a club's making those sorts of decisions?
Look, you've got to understand that unlike players, when it comes to administration, what you need to know is that people have the passion and the energy. The players always can have the passion and the energy, but they may not have the legs. An administrator, it's very different. You've got to want it, And it may well be, and what we're hearing is that Anthony Di Pietro has got some business decisions that are going to take him away. And rather than impact on his role at Melbourne Victory, he feels that Melbourne Victory are in very good hands. There's a whole new partnership with the 777 organisation. They've got the new airline, Bonza, up in the air and doing some good things. And he probably, look, it's 13 years as the chair, and during his 13 years, Victory have been, if not the biggest club in the country, certainly one of the most successful. It's a pity when key administration pieces choose to leave the club, especially when you had a really down year. I don't think there could have been a lower season than quite possibly their first season back in 2005, when they finished near enough to the bottom of the competition. So it's only one way now. It's up. So for John Doveston, it's in his hands now, but you've got to look at what they've done. Anthony Di Pietro has put runs on the board. He's won under his leadership, the club has achieved 2 men's championships, 1 A-League men's premiership, 2 Australian Cups. We're talking now 2 of the old FFA Cups. And I think both of them might have come under, was it Muscat? And under both, I think both under Muscat. He's had a history-making treble. The A-League Women's that they instituted got up and they've done some fantastic things, and they've gone back to back in 21 and 22. The A-League Women's Premiership was a big win for them too. It proved that they weren't just a one-sided entity. They were going to support their women, and it's been terrific in that regard. They've developed a tremendously strong and prolific community department, which does a lot of good work. And I think they've secured the future of Victory as a major sporting entity, especially in Melbourne and in Victoria, with the 777 group coming on board and doing the business from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Anthony Di Pietro, whatever you might want to say, you cannot take away from the fact that under his 13 years, they've scored a lot of runs.
They've had some great members.
Put a lot of points on the board. And did you think it was a surprise when you heard the news?
Yeah, it wasn't something that I was...
Like a bolt from the blue?
Yeah, no, it wasn't something that I was expecting to hear today, but I think you can understand it with the way maybe this season has gone for the club, maybe some changes, but, I think that I just want to see Melbourne Victory do well, and that's the ultimate thing. And,
I think the only people that don't want the Victory to do well are their feared rivals.
Yes, exactly.
Namely the Adelaide Reds, Melbourne City, and any team you want from outside the state of Victoria.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, an opportunity to talk to the man who will be calling the A-League men's final, the man from Paramount Plus, the man from Channel 10. I first saw him calling the game, I think it was on SBS a lifetime ago, with a young guy called Les Murray. We're talking about Simon Hill, and he'll be joining us very, very shortly. I've got some great news for Football Nation radio listeners. Our supportive partner, Northern Motor Group, is offering $250 off any in-stock vehicle this end of financial year. That's if you take delivery before the 30th of June. With 8 big car brands, MG, Nissan, Kia, Isuzu Ute, Jeep, Ram, Samsung, Peugeot and Pacific Caravans, it's literally a one-stop shop for all your driving needs. Plus, with over 150 quality pre-owned vehicles, Northern Motor Group really does have your next vehicle purchase ready and waiting. Don't wait. Visit www.northernmotorgroup.com.au today. They're in Grimshaw Street, Bundoora, and tell them George sent you. LMCT 6595.
Are you looking to change your destiny in life? Be your own boss? Start your own business? If you are, you need people who understand your needs and are committed to helping you make it happen. At DKP & Co Chartered Accountants, we are more than just accountants. We are business advisors, taxation consultants, and strategists that specialise in setting up businesses. We understand the client and give them the very best customised advice and strategies to achieve their goals. Visit our website dkpco.com.au or give us a call today on 03 9023 9370. Fast, proactive, personal. That's DKP & Co Chartered Accountants.
You're listening to the State of Our Football Nation on FNR. As promised, we said to you we had a special guest lined up for what promises to be a super exciting weekend. It's grand final time. Pokuah Frimpong is smiling from ear to ear. I said to you, Simon Hill is going to join us. He's calling the game, and lo and behold, via the magic of Zoom, he joins us as he's busy preparing for the Dolan Warren Medal coming up tonight. How are you, my friend?
How are you, Simon?
Can you hear us? I can't hear. Simon, where are you, Simon?
I've got you.
Ah, beautiful. So I promised Pokuah that we'd grab you and, as they say, despite your work schedule and the number of commitments you've got today, how far away are we from starting the official presentation for the end-of-year function, which has now become part of the sporting calendar? I'm talking about the Dolan Warren Medal.
We're about 4 hours away, just under.
You're feeling absolutely no nerves. How's preparation going?
What, for the Dolan Warrants?
Yes.
Well, I'm not involved in the Dolan Warrants.
I thought you'd be involved. How can they not include you?
Well, to be fair, I've been included many years in the past. I mean, I hosted these events
Yes, I know.
for quite a few years.
Yes.
But, you know, time moves on and you meet different faces. So, I'm happy. Listen, I'm happy not to be working tonight. I'll just go and have a feed and have a beer.
Hey, listen, is there any truth in the rumour that you are so pent up waiting for the triple that City may create magic if they finish the season as they almost... showcased, except for this last game against, lo and behold, I didn't think they'd lose that game, but again, it's Brentford have had that wood over clubs. Beat Arsenal, they're not early in the season.
No, we drew.
Yeah.
We
drew?
We drew 1-1.
You drew 1-1.
Did we not?
But it was a
They've
shock.
beaten us twice. They've beaten us twice this season.
What is it they've got? What is it that they've managed to get?
They've got a good manager for a start. Thomas Frank
that's true.
is excellent. And they've got some good players. You know, I know Ivan Toney has got the long ban for doing something he shouldn't with the betting. But, you know, Brian Mbumo, I think, is an excellent player.
And he showed
plenty more besides.
And he showed.
They've got a good team ethic. They're well led, they're organised, and particularly at home at that new stadium, you know, it can be quite a cauldron. So, no, it's no disgrace. And to be honest, you know, had there been something riding on that game, it might have been a different outcome. But with the Cup final and the Champions League final to come, I think it's understandable that Pep made some changes, and perhaps equally understandable that, you know, City probably weren't quite at their best.
Well, as we saw in the last episode of Ted Lasso, and I don't want to be a spoil sport, but if you haven't seen it, you've missed out. City won that too.
Did they?
Yeah, they win the EPL.
I haven't watched Ted
Lasso.
Lasso.
You've got to see it. And this season especially, it was maligned in some quarters by a host of different people. But I think they've forgotten what made this show so special. It came along at a terrific time, right in the midst of the COVID pandemic around the world, and it gave us some wonderful light and some, I think, a view on how to treat others at a time when the whole world had forgotten how to behave. So in many respects, it's a very special bit of television. And well done to Apple, well done to Jason Sudeikis and the crew. And now the big question is, do they come back for season 4? But look, I thought the efforts of getting Pep. You actually get Pep talking in Ted Lasso in the last episode, and that's not easy. You don't get Pep to do that sort of stuff, and it's worth looking at the show just for that, Manchester City friend.
Okay. Well, I've never watched a second of it, so I'm taking your word for it.
Well,
to be honest.
Well, here's something.
I watch enough football without going down the fiction road as well.
Yes, but the beauty of this is there's just enough football in there, right? But it's all about human beings and their interactions. So it has an awful lot to offer.
Maybe I'll give it a go.
Yeah, give it a binge when you get a moment to be off the golf course. By the way, how's your handicap?
Blimey. I haven't played golf in probably 5 years. I do love it.
Hang on. We got you on the golf course only last year. Or was it the year before? We got you and we did an interview with you and you were on your way either to the golf course or coming off the golf course.
That was, I think that was the last time I played, actually. It was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But no, I don't get much chance to play golf, to be honest, because obviously, as you know, it takes 4 hours to get to do a full round.
Correct.
Probably longer than that with my handicap.
Yep.
I just don't have the time, particularly during the football season. As soon as the football season ends, I'm normally on a plane back to the UK. So, yeah, the golf clubs have sat rotting in my apartment for quite some time, unfortunately.
Robbie Thompson is in France, I think, at the moment with the family, and he'll be coming back a little bit later in the year. And we're looking forward to catching up with him. But will you be taking a break after the grand final, or will you be hanging around for the Women's World Cup?
Well, look, I am involved in the Women's World Cup. I will be working on that, but I am taking a break in the interim. As soon as, actually, I've got to wait until the Argentina-Australia game, which is on the 15th of June. And as soon as that's done, then I am heading off overseas. So I'll have a quick break. It's not as long as my usual off-season break, which is unfortunate. But, I'm looking forward to the Women's World Cup. I've never actually covered one before, so... this will be fascinating. And, with it being in Australia as well, hopefully it'll be a great tournament, good showcase for our sport in this country. I
think, too, there's another element to this, and that is that there's a distinct possibility, and I'm getting this bubble and this buzz happening around me from people that normally don't get excited by football, and many of them are women, and it tells me that the game may well get its biggest boost in years outside of the Olympics and outside of, world titles and things like that. So I think being a co-host with New Zealand, they could be a catalyst for something quite special. And we've now even got the government talking that they might provide us with more funding, which is something that falls very comfortably on my ears.
Yeah, well, look, obviously that is the long-term play, and my fear with all of this, and this is probably born out of decades, and you've been involved in the game here a lot longer than I have, George. We've seen a lot of false dawns down the years.
Correct.
We had last year an absolutely fantastic Men's World Cup in terms of Australia's performance. And we all thought on the back of that was going to translate into, an improved product in terms of the domestic game.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that didn't quite occur for one reason or another. Now, we've had occasions in the past, the Asian Cup win in 2015, the inclusion of Western Sydney Wanderers, Alessandro Del Piero in 2013 that gave the league an enormous boost. But we didn't capitalize upon it. And, for me, the test will be, I have no doubt that the stadiums will pack out for the Women's World Cup. It'll be a great event. And people in particular will get behind the Matildas. Of course they will. But the test, the acid test for me is going to be round one in both the men's and women's next season. And I want to see increased attendance figures. I want to see more people watching on TV. Otherwise, you're all this talk of legacy really is
just
pie in the sky. I mean, there will be some legacy. Obviously, there'll be improved facilities in certain places, but we haven't got a new stadium out of it.
No.
We haven't got an awful lot of money out of the governments, which we should have done, because you can guarantee if this was a Rugby World Cup or a Cricket World Cup, then they'd be absolutely pouring money at it.
Correct.
So, we've got to see some tangible benefit for it. Otherwise, the World Cup will come and go, and we'll be back to square one at the start of next season. And that's what I do not want to happen. I'm sorry to sound like an old curmudgeon.
No.
But as you know, George, we've been down this road before. So
I've already seen.
We want to see a proper legacy for this World Cup.
We're talking to Simon Hill, who, of course, is doing the commentary for the A-League Grand Final, the men's, on Saturday night, which pits. What is it? Is it going? It's being pitched as the David versus Goliath. It's the Central Coast Mariners against Melbourne City. Melbourne City, again, coming up trumps, delivering a tremendously consistent season. And we saw some wonderful daring and run from this young crop of players at the Central Coast Mariners that not only excited many football fans, but got their region right behind them. 20,000 for the last home game. And as Richard Peel, their chair, said, a pity it wasn't our gate. the gate, of course, going to the APL, which has had a checkered first year of clear sail from its dismantling or its departure from Football Australia. We finally have now seen one clear season of the APL, and if you're going to judge it, is it just a pass, Mark?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Look, in terms of the actual football on the field, there's nothing wrong with the competition.
No,
despite the preconceived ideas that it's a poor standard and it's not as good as the Premier League. Well, of course, it's not as good as the Premier League. Very few competitions around the world are as good as the Premier League.
Just ask the Europeans.
Yeah, exactly. The fans still turn up to watch those competitions, and they still value their local league. So we do suffer from a poor perception, and the reason for that largely is that we've got more than enough football fans in this country, but not enough of them are fans of A-League clubs.
Yeah,
and so they tend to view it from a very dispassionate point of view. Now, if I tune in to watch, I don't know, Fulham against Bournemouth in the Premier League, the quality is not necessarily great. And obviously the top sides play great football, but down the bottom, it's not always that brilliant. But the difference is you have full stadiums, you have committed supporter bases, and there's a narrative because of promotion and relegation, all of which amps up the feeling around those games and makes it perhaps feel a lot better in terms of quality than it perhaps is. Now, we don't have that yet in Australia.
No.
In either sense. So that drives some of that perception. In terms of your original question, as I said, I think the investment in the football side of things in some ways by the APL has been okay. The problem is that they've made a couple of big decisions that have not gone down too well. And let's be honest, the grand final decision is one of them.
Yeah.
Now, I've gone on record as saying I don't agree with it. And, I've copped a bit of flack from within the game. Well, I don't care, quite honestly. This is a game of opinions. And if people in the media can't give their opinions, then we're not doing our job properly.
And stand up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've got to, also be mindful of what the fans are thinking. And a lot of fans don't like it. Now, it may well be on Saturday night that we get a full house, in which case it's great, but it doesn't necessarily vindicate the decision. Because, you've got to look at longer term costs in terms of the PR damage that it's done the competition. So, there are a few different elements to it. Now, to be fair to the APL, since the furore of the grand final decision, that they've recognised, at least in part, that they need to be much more consultative with the supporters. They can't just ride roughshod over the supporters with decisions of this magnitude in future. So they've put in place committees, which is a good start. They've made some mistakes in other areas as well, but they are new to it. And, it's a difficult competition to run, particularly in Australia, where it's not the number one sport. So they were always going to make some mistakes. I'm prepared to give them a bit of leeway for that. But equally, when they do make poor decisions, they've got to expect comeback. We're in the media, we're not PR agents for them. We cover the game, good, bad, or indifferent. So, we have to be able to critique it. Otherwise, we lose our credibility with supporters who pay their money to not only support at the gate, but watch on TV, buy subscriptions, etc. So, it's an interdependent relationship that we all have. And so in terms of whether they get a pass mark or not, I don't know whether that's for me to judge, to be honest. I think that's for the supporters. Football without fans, as Jock Stein famously said, is nothing. So it's what they think, not what I think that matters.
Yeah, very good, very good. Pokuah?
Simon, I was just heading into this game on the weekend, to the grand final. What is the kind of matchups that you're looking out for? Obviously, as a commentator, what are the things that excite you particularly about this game?
Well, I think it's going to be, a classic arm wrestle in terms of slightly different styles. Melbourne City, try to dominate teams in terms of their possession, and they overpower teams. I mean, we saw this in the second leg of the semi-final against Sydney, albeit that, there was a big turning point after 20 minutes when Max Burgess got a red card. And as soon as Melbourne City opened the scoring, to be honest, you just could not see a way back for Sydney FC because Melbourne City smother the life out of you. They're that good at doing that. And of course, they've got quality players as well. Now, the interesting thing about the Mariners is they're not only on a run of good form, which City are as well, but they can hurt you a lot in transition. They've not only got pace, but they've got very clever players. The likes of Jason Cummings, the likes of Marco Tullio, who is in season best form at the moment. So, it's a question, I think, of how the two teams set up. Do Melbourne City make changes to try and a composition, or do they not bother about that? Now, to be fair, against Sydney, they made 3 changes, which at the time I thought, oh, that's interesting. Nuno Reis at right back. He dropped Florent Berenguer and Richard van der Ven, left them on the bench. In the end, he was absolutely bang on. Nuno Reis barely gave Adrian Segacic a kick. Might have been different had Robert Mack been fit, of course. But, so it's a fascinating matchup. There are individual battles across the field. Who wins the midfield battle, I think, will be key. Who does Rado Vidicic play alongside Aidan O'Neill? Does he revert to Berenguer? Does he play Valon Berisha a bit deeper? Does he restore Richard van der Ven to the midfield? Because the Mariners' middle two of Max Ballard and Josh Nisbet are arguably the best central midfield pairing in the country for me. Not that they score a lot of goals, but they do what, and I've likened this to this pairing before, Massimo Madoka and Matt Mackay used to do for Brisbane
industry
back in the day.
They provide
They're little
industry.
Terriers,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
They run like rats all over the place. They're very difficult to stop. So, that's one really key area that I'm looking forward to seeing. The other one, of course, is, who gets the service to the 2 top strikers in the league? Is it going to be Jamie McLaren that has a field day or Jason Cummings or somebody else? So it's a fascinating final.
And there are so many wonderful youngsters who've put their hand up this year. Mm-hmm. And I've been seriously impressed. Pokuah and I had an opportunity to speak to Nick Montgomery on 2 or 3 different occasions. And not only do we find him he's a deep thinker, he's seriously focused on getting the best out of his players. And I say that and I say this in a very old school way. He believes in giving them as much cuddling and support as possible, but he demands 100%, not 110, not 99, 100% he wants. And he's been tough on all of them at different stages. And we mustn't forget the biggest and brightest star left at the beginning of the year, and they just got better.
Yeah.
So he's fiery. You know how often we talk about the team as a mirror or almost an example of the coach, the character of the coach. Well, if that's the case, the Mariners are as tough and as ornery as Nick Montgomery is committed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember watching Nick Montgomery in the Premier League and the Championship in my days in England, and he is as tough as Sheffield Steel, which is where he's from. I think his teams are better to watch than that, to be honest.
Yep.
And you're right; he's become almost a guru to his players, and from the outside, you can only watch on with admiration at how he's crafted a team that has the best of 2 different elements, some good young kids that you've alluded to already, but he's also supplemented that with a sprinkling of very good experienced pros. Jason Cummings is one, of course. Tulio's another. And Danny Vukovic between the posts, has been so good that, Mark Birigitti's absence hasn't really been noticed. He's got the best out of players like Storm Roux, who was perhaps at a little bit of a crossroads.
Best season I've seen him in. Yep.
And the other one that I wanted to mention was, and this had me scratching my head a little bit at the time, but he's proven to be absolutely bang on. I watched Jacob Farrell and thought that this kid's, fantastic. And he brought in James McGarry during the transfer window in a swap deal for Thomas Aquilina for Newcastle. And I thought, what's he done that for? He doesn't need him. He's got Jacob Farrell. Now, to be fair to him, James McGarry has been absolutely sensational, so much so that Jacob Farrell now can't get in the team. So, he's provided competition for places as well. He's not allowed those players to rest on their laurels.
Correct.
And that's maybe another one of the reasons why he's had so much success. So I'm delighted for him. He's a good fellow, a football man to his marrow. And I think this is just the start of his journey as a coach. I think ultimately he will end up back in Sheffield as manager of his beloved Sheffield United. And
you may
the
well
way he's going, he'll deserve it.
I cannot argue with anything that you said. The other thing, we had an opportunity to catch up and speak to the chair of the Central Coast Mariners, Richard Peel, and he said to us, the only decision I should be credited for, he says, is that I told Nick very early on, whatever you need, go forth and we'll get it for you. And he brought people of the calibre of Bernal. In other words, all he did was give Nick air to carry out. He didn't put any pressure on him, and he said to him, no, we're going to trust you. We believe in you. And he backed it up. And it's been a remarkable journey. And as we touched on at the very beginning of this discussion, the community of the Central Coast Mariners, which has been up and down like a yo-yo over the last decade, because they've been like that. They've been the yo-yo side. On a given day they could win, but on most other days they were lucky to put up a performance. But this season has been quite simply outstanding, and what we've seen has been this daring run and this real adventure, especially last week against, or the week before against Adelaide. I thought Adelaide was going to go up there and upset them because they've been so good under Carl Viet, and Carl's got a crop of youngsters there too that have been very exciting and have kept Cooper Stadium, pulsating. And that's one of the great stadiums in this country. And a real football stadium. And I've loved it. And I thought they were going to go up there and do the business. But no, Central Coast Mariners with 20,000 people jam-packed into that wonderful stadium with the palm trees, they were incredible. And Nick and Richard said to us, that sound, that noise, that energy was going a couple of hours after the game had finished. That's how much energy they're creating, both at player level and in the community.
Yeah, and, a lot of them will be in Parramatta on Saturday night, which could well give the Mariners a big advantage.
That's true.
Had it been in Melbourne at Amy Park, where City haven't lost a home game all year, then you would have thought the odds were very heavily stacked in City's favour. But I think this sort of swings the balance a bit towards neutral, because they'll have the majority of fans inside the stadium. Just on the Mariners' journey, I mean, you've got to give also obviously some credit to Alan Stajic, who started to turn the club around before he departed.
Yep.
It's only a few years ago that the Mariners won 3 consecutive wooden spoons, and people were wanting them thrown out the competition. And if you also remember, they had that ludicrous PR exercise where they brought in Usain Bolt and were considering offering him a contract.
Did you say insane Bolt?
Nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, the decision would have been insane.
Correct.
But, so they've moved away from all that gimmicky stuff and all that nonsense, and have returned to being a proper football club with good foundations. And Alan Stajic was a part of that. Nick Montgomery was initially the academy coach, which put that foundation in place. And now they've got that production line, which they were famed for so many years, of course. The likes of Matt Ryan, Miller Jedinak, Trent Sainsbury, Bernie Abini, they all came through the Mariners and earned the club a lot of money. And they're going to do that again because they've got their academy sorted. That's the basis of what an A-League club, or at least part of it, should be, is to have that production line and to make money, to reinvest in the academy, to bring the next generation through. All the while, of course, while trying to remain competitive, which is the tricky bit. But that's where you need the good coach. And thankfully for the Mariners, they've got everything.
No, you just touched on, obviously, the key foundation of having a really good youth setup for your side and ensuring the long-term success of a football club. Besides that aspect, what are the other things that some of these other clubs are missing out on so we can get more fans to the games and develop strong connections between fans and clubs? And see, when fans are going to games, they're saying that it's not just the current group of players, there are players after that will still continue the legacy of the club onwards.
It's a good question. To be honest, it's the $64 million question that all A-League clubs need to answer to a greater or lesser extent. And obviously there are some clubs that have been better at it than others. Melbourne Victory have been very successful, not so at the moment, obviously, but over the course of the journey. Sydney FC have done pretty well. But there are a lot of others who I think have sort of fallen by the wayside for one reason or another. Now, there are various reasons for that. Brisbane moving nearly an hour north of the city has been a massive disconnect with their supporter base. Okay, they've also not had the results on the field, but it's been often quoted in Australian football circles, if you get a winning team, people will turn up. Well, they will for grand finals, but they won't necessarily turn up week in, week out for the next 10 years just because you play good football this season or win a trophy. And Brisbane Roar is the classic example of that. If that was true, then Roar would be getting 20, 30,000 every week on the back of what Ange Postecoglou did there. But they're not, because success is transient. And what it's about is a connection between the fan and the club. Now, there are many ways, of course, of achieving that. And clearly in mitigation, A-League clubs are still pretty young. So we've not got that intergenerational support that is endemic in Europe and South America and other parts of the world as yet. But we should be doing better than we are at the moment. And that's because the clubs, by and large, don't always listen to their supporters. They don't always have a great or individual identity. A lot of A-League clubs, in my opinion, are cookie cutters of each other. We need stadiums that not only look like home, but feel like home. It would be lovely to have some of our own. This is why people love going to Cooper Stadium in Adelaide. It looks like a football stadium, smells like a football stadium. It's got red and white everywhere. It is the home of Adelaide United, and you are in no doubt about that when you go there. And that's why it's so brilliant. A lot of other clubs don't have that and don't seem to have any aspiration to have it, which just baffles me. And the other thing is they've got to tap into, the big playing base, the junior participation levels that we bang on about endlessly. I mean, just to touch on the FIFA Women's World Cup again, if I hear the word participation numbers one more time out the back of this World Cup, I think I'm going to scream. We've got more than enough participants in this country. We got participants coming out of our ears. We don't have enough pitches for them to play on. What we need is more fans of the game paying their hard-earned so that we can build a better professional sport. And that's on the clubs. They've got to build that in their individual cities. And too many of them, and Melbourne City, I'm sorry to say, are one. They're very successful. They've got a great team, and yet their crowds went down this season. How is that even possible with the team that they've got? And that's because they have not enough cut through in the Melbourne market. So they've got to work on that, and they've got to find ways to tap into the football supporter base that is clearly there in Melbourne that doesn't support Victory. Now, I've gone on record as saying I think bringing in a marquee player would be one way to do it, but they seem loath to do that. It's not the only solution, but those are the sorts of things I think that clubs need to be looking at. And just one more point on this. Sorry, I know I've banged on a lot.
No, go for it.
Is I think, and we started to see maybe the first elements of this in the last couple of weeks. We're on 2 reports coming out. We also need a proper pyramid of football in this country, which means a second division, which means ultimately promotion and relegation. That's what football fans like. They don't like closed leagues with salary caps and no punishment for failure. They want the glass ceiling removed, at least in part. And I'm not saying we can have it tomorrow, but the sooner we can move towards that, the better. And then we get a bit of jeopardy down at the bottom end of the table as well at the top. We need it. I
wanted to touch on, because you touched on the Women's World Cup. As somebody who loves the Dub, and I think it's an interesting league, and the Dub has had an interesting journey in the context of women's football. It used to be, I think it probably held a higher standing in the past because we used to be able to attract maybe higher quality players in the past, and we've transitioned to maybe a more development league. How do you see the relationship between the Matildas and just women's football as a whole in this country growing out of just having, the fans that we have who are dedicated and committed, but they're not enough to sustain, the long-term aspirations of these clubs in that sense? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, look, the Matildas have the same relationship to the A-League women's as the Socceroos do the A-League men's. And again, after the Men's World Cup last year, we thought we'd get this knock-on effect for the A-League men's, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So until the clubs do the work, it's not a gender-specific issue; it's a whole of game issue.
Yep.
The A-League men's crowds aren't big enough, and it's even worse with the women's. Now, what we're seeing in the rest of the world, particularly Europe at the moment, is a huge investment, not just in facilities and wages for players, but we're seeing investment in promotion of the women's game, promotion of those players. You look in the media in the UK, it's, you will read pieces on the FA Women's Super League not just celebrities, but I'm talking about the league itself. You'll read pieces about the FA Women's Super League on a daily basis in The Guardian, in the Daily Mirror, in the Telegraph. It's virtually everywhere. And as a result, that higher publicity has driven crowds to be a lot bigger, particularly for the big games. Same in Spain, same in France, same in Germany. We're seeing crowds of 50, 60,000 for some games. Now, we're not even at a fraction of that in Australia. And that's not a problem with the A-League women's per se. It's a problem with the game in this country because it's the same for the men.
Yeah, very true.
So it's a football problem. It's a whole of game problem. It's not gender specific. If we talk about, what is it going to do for A-League women's? Well, it's all part of the same pot. If the men's was going swimmingly and the women's wasn't, I would say yes, absolutely. Then that's what they fixed in Europe with, say, the Premier League being massive, but the FA Women's Super League being not. They've leveled that up at least to a certain degree. Still got a long way to go, of course, but they leveled it up to a degree.
Our special guest.
We're both at low levels.
Our special guest on State of Our Football Nation is Simon Hill, the man who'll be commentating on the A-League Men's Grand Final being played at the CommBank Stadium in Sydney. It's the game between the Central Coast Mariners and Melbourne City. You spoke glowingly about Nick Montgomery and the job that he's done there and how the Mariners have carried a wonderful new energy into this grand final. Let's talk about Rado Vidicic, who wasn't the Melbourne City coach at the beginning of the season. He was looking after the women's team. What have you made of his journey? And compared to Nick, this man, very, very quiet. He just sets his horses out there.
Rado's not that quiet. Rado's pretty loud on the sidelines, I can't lie.
Really? You've been that close, have you?
Oh, I watched the Dub. I've seen the man.
But, by comparison, if you're putting Nick and Rado alongside one another, you'll hear Nick before you hear Rado. So what are you making of the Melbourne City turnout and the fact that they have to, as they say, get themselves sorted, arrive in Sydney, settle their nerves, and then put on a team that will best be able to handle this young and fiery group of youngsters from the Central Coast Mariners?
Well, look, I think the biggest compliment I can pay Rado is that, they've barely missed a beat since Paddy Kisnorbo left. I thought that might be a problem for them. when he left mid-season. But, he's picked up the baton and it's been relatively smooth. They've only lost 3 times since he took over. They won the premiership by 11 points at an absolute canter and, quite easily disposed of Sydney FC in the semi-final. So he's done really well. And if anything, I think and this is no disrespect to Paddy because this is the way he builds his teams, but I actually think he's made City a little bit better to watch in some ways. I think he's given them a little bit more freedom from the defensive structures that they had under Paddy. I'm not saying that they're not there, but he's maybe just loosened the reins a little bit. Which has made for, exciting games involving City. They perhaps leak a few more goals than they did under Paddy Kisnorbo. But, going forward, they've still got such a potent threat. And I think he's done a really good job. You're right. He's pretty undemonstrative, Rado, but that's okay. That's his personality. He'll get his point across when needs be from the sideline. And, I think this would be a terrific achievement if he was to, lead Melbourne City to the double in not even a full season in charge. He did it with the dub team in 2020, won the premiership and the championship. And it's now a well-established sort of production line now, isn't it? Because Paddy Kisnorbo came from the women's team as well. Did. So, and now he's got Dario in charge, his son of the women's team. So, there's obviously a good succession there in place. No, I think he's done a terrific job, and wouldn't be surprised if if City win the double on Saturday.
There you go. How are things otherwise? Have you recovered from the shock of seeing Leicester, return to the championship after what they did about 6 years ago?
Yeah, was it a shock? I don't know. I mean, when you looked at the start of the season, Brendan Rodgers, who was then in charge, of course, he's not anymore, it's Dean Smith, but, he wasn't given any money to spend. He got a little bit during the window, but I remember him saying at the time, we're going to have a season of struggle because we've not been able to invest in the squad. And as you know, in the Premier League, if you stand still, you go backwards.
Correct. Yeah, it's an arms
unfortunately,
race.
They just gave themselves too much to do. So I feel sorry for them. It was a great story, the ultimate Cinderella story in 2016 when they won the Premier League. 2 years ago, FA Cup winners. But, that's football in England. That's football in most parts of the world. If you don't perform, you get punished for it.
Yeah, Dortmund are still wondering what happened. How can they get overrun by Bayern?
Yeah.
They did. They did.
That's unfortunate, isn't it?
Simon, it's been an incredible year when you add to it a most magnificent World Cup in Qatar. Despite what we were told leading into the tournament, the World Cup was quite extraordinary. Australia's efforts through our Socceroos was magical. We gave the world champions, Argentina, one heck of a run. And there was a young boy at the very end who almost gave us an even bigger thrill because I thought the way he took the ball down in those dying moments, spun around and hit it goalwards, it took a quality save by quite possibly the best keeper in the competition for that month or so to keep the score as it was. Otherwise, they would have been going into extra time. Now, Australia plays Argentina in China in a little while. What do you think? What do you think? Are we going to see the coaching Arnie unleash some of the youngsters, or is he going to play a more steadied group and try and put on a very solid performance? Is he going to dare to win?
Unleash the kids. I'd love to see him unleash the kids. And look, to be fair, they didn't play defensively against Argentina at the World Cup. And you talked about that Qual moment, and I always stood behind the goal in amongst a little smattering of Australian fans. The whole stadium was Argentina, basically, apart from about 500 of us. Yeah. And we all thought that was going to go in, but it was a wonderful save by Emiliano Martinez. I think, Arnie obviously will be having one eye on the Asian Cup next January. He's already brought Nestor Irankunda into the squad once. I wouldn't mind seeing him getting at least a bit of a run off the bench. I think, him and Qual and one or two of the other young kids of the future. So who knows what he'll do. It's a tough game, obviously. They're playing the world champions. Messi is going to be part of the squad, or at least he is at the moment. So it's a big ask to ask them to go to Beijing and win. But I think we'd love to see them go for it and see what happens. But of course, it's a one-off fixture, and I guess from Arnie's point of view, with the Asian Cup around the corner, he also doesn't want to go there and lose 5 or 6-0, and then have the next 4 or 5 months to dwell on that result before he can get them back. So. It's that's the vagaries of being an international coach, isn't it?
The very reasonable Simon Hill giving us a piece of his mind as he prepares to take the Paramount Plus and Channel 10 commentary into the grand final. You guys starting about 7 o'clock, or will you be on a little bit earlier on Saturday?
That's a good question, George. I think it's 7 o'clock.
Right.
But check your guide for details. I can't tell you off the top of my head. I know we kick off at 7:45, so that's when I'll be on.
Yeah. All right, my boy. Listen, all the very, very best. Have a great call.
Thanks,
and have an extended break. You've certainly earned it. It's been a big year. And can I also take a moment to say, congratulations on all the stuff that you've done on Offsiders. I think the half a dozen appearances you've made this year, you talked the most sense, and you gave the game a chance to, to be understood a little bit better by some segments of the marketplace that don't always think about.
A few people too,
yes,
George.
That's all right. and long may it continue. Simon Hill, our special guest.
That's part of our job.
Good on you, my boy.
Thanks. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
There you go. Simon Hill on State of Our Football Nation. And as Pokuah and I have said on a number of occasions throughout the year, it's always fun when you get a special guest and they give you not only what they believe is fair and reasonable, but they're prepared to also stick by their beliefs. And Simon, as he said, has upset a few people, but for the good of the game, I think it'll bear fruit in the long run. Until next week. You're listening to the State of Our Football Nation on FNR.